My humble respect to Guru Mahan, Guru Piran Sivasankaran, Guru Piran Neo, fellow Jnanis. Today I'm going to cover Mahan's, why Mahan's teachings are very important. This is my own, experience of understanding Swamiji's teachings. Also trying to understand all the other philosophies, particularly the Advaita philosophy and also the Dvaitva philosophies. And, coming from a tradition or family where Dvaitva is very imprinted, the importance of God, prayers, and then the same parents who taught me Dvaitva was also teaching Advaita, and which is about, Dvaitva is God and me are separate, and the objective of my life is to attain the grace of God so that life will be better. But whatever it is, we all come from the tradition of Dvaitva. And I was fortunate to be introduced to Advaitva teachings, the various scriptures, and then the teachings of Mahan, and understanding them, putting them to practice, researching them, introspecting, contemplating, reflecting. Where does all this sit? And today I'm going to talk about how I see it in the context of this IGOD philosophy that Mahan touched on. I want to recap an important passage that Swamiji we covered the last time. In this, he spoke about, what is the use of studying this book, which is the IGOD book. And Swamiji says that, I have given here the gist of all philosophies. Which means, everything that, one wants to know about Advaitva or Dvaitva is encompassed in this. And I'm going to show you how that is the case. But he says that, one needs to use the knowledge in the IGOD book to search for the truth and to do further research, right? You can't just accept it and say, okay, this is what it is. You have to put it to practice, try it out, use, transform your body, your mind, your senses, your intelligence, as a laboratory for this, experimentation of all the things that Swami spoke about in this book. Only then one would understand the teachings of Mahan, the teachings of all the other philosophies that he's talking about. Again, here, the question of why studying this is really important. He says, many people have tried this. There are many, and he found this path to this discovery through Kundalini. And more importantly, he says that by discovering this, he's able to give a more complete story. And this teachings gives you a more complete, wholesome, paripurnam, story. And if we acquire this knowledge, you see that you are able to appreciate all the scriptures, all the masters, all the religions, and you see that, as I told you, this becomes a general theorem of theory of everything, a theorem of everything, and you see everything else is a special case. So if you are in a particular place, abode, or particular, place of worship, you'll be able to connect. If you are in a scientific place, you're able to connect. If you are in different places, you're able to see a special case of that bigger, what I call the philosophy. So this is what Swamiji is saying. So for me to take you through this, I need to introduce some interesting concepts. So bear with me with the concept because you'll see the entire story coming through. So I'm going to talk about, there is often this notion of material versus spiritual life. And I'm going to show you a simple model to show you that how we look at this material versus spiritual life. So on this axis, I'm going to call it, this is our material life. We have all our aspirations, ambitions, desires, and all those things that we love in life, right? And so here, a pure materialist would be somewhere here. And on this line here, it is spiritual life. So we have two lives. One is material life. We have a lot of desires. And we have spiritual life, which is often people say has to be desireless. And there is a continuum. So this is someone who's pure materialist. Spiritual doesn't count at all. Everything is material. And then you have another continuum where pure spiritualists, they say that if you want to attain the ultimate spiritual enlightenment, one needs to give up all the desires, zero desires, no desires at all. So we have these extremes, right? And we are probably somewhere, and before that, and you see that, so we have this continuum, and often the Advaita would say, look, you have to, have the desireless to attain that oneness. And the Dvaita will say that, we, as we give up our material desire, we get the grace of God. We would not become God, but we get the grace of God. So we will not touch this line. Whereas Advaita said, no, we can be one. If we give up everything, we can attain this state of oneness. Dvaita says that, we can slowly give up everything, but we will get close to God. We'll get the grace of God. Whatever may be, there is a trade-off between material desires and spiritual enlightenment. So this is something that, we see. And I think most of us are somewhere in between. Most of us are probably here. We have some element of material desires, aspirations, and ambition. And there are some that we have spiritual connection, spiritual. So most of us are somewhere in there, in between, right? Now, so I'm calling that position that we have is A1 position, just, but what we have is that there is a trade-off. Every time, sometimes we feel so spiritual, so we have to give up this, we do that, we do all the penance and all those things to become more spiritual. There are days that we want to be more material. We want to eat our food, we want to watch our movies, we want to do many things. So what we have is that often, we want to achieve that ultimate reality. We want to achieve that supreme consciousness that would require us to give up everything. On the other hand, we also have, this material desires. We want better jobs, higher salary, better cars, better food, better relationships, all those things also. And this is the thing that we grapple with in our lives. So which way to go? So there's always this turmoil that all of us have. And sometimes we call this zero-sum game. You get one side, you give up something else. So you have to give and take. So, in this philosophy, we call it zero-sum game. The sum is, one. You have to give up. There's two things. Either you give up one or to take up something, or vice versa. So this is the debate that goes on, that if you want to attain a spiritual life, you have to give up your desires. You've got to extinguish your desires. So how do we reconcile this? So what do we do? What to do, right? And this is the part that is really important. And I'm sure all of us have gone through this some point in our lives. And this is where Mahan comes. So what does Mahan says? Actually, you really don't need to have this trade-off. All you need to do is learn to move this upwards, right? When you learn to move this upwards, and this is something really interesting, what does that moving upwards means? It means that this is our state of awareness. In this state of awareness, we are always trading off between, material and spiritual. There's this trade-off. That's what our intellect, our awareness is giving us at this level. But Swamiji says the following: raise our awareness. This is where the jnana is very important. So how to raise this? If we raise our awareness, we're able to see things better. We're able to see our material life better, our spiritual life better. And what does that mean? And this is what Mahan's philosophy is. It's about introspection, contemplation, reflection, and meditation. When you introspect of your material life, you'd be able to understand why we have these desires, why the particular thought comes in, what's the root cause of the thought, what is the underlying structure of the thought, and so on. We contemplate, why is it there? Why do I have this? After all this comes from me, right? And you reflect, by understanding, before understanding and after understanding, how is your mind's DNA? How is your emotional state? And you see that before understanding, you get a lot of turbulence, turmoil. But once you understand, you get a little bit more calmer. So that reflection starts taking place. And when the reflection starts taking place and the understanding comes in, a sense of clarity comes in. The sense of clarity comes in. You see that meditation becomes more easier. That contemplation, when meditation becomes better, you're not tormented by the thoughts. Your thoughts don't run away everywhere. Your thoughts become more calmer. Your introspection becomes deeper. Your contemplation becomes deeper. Your reflection becomes deeper. Your meditation intensifies. And this cycle goes on. And this is what Mahan's teachings of this IGOD philosophies. It helps us move our awareness curve to a higher level. That awareness, this is what Swamiji says, the wisdom, knowledge, jnana. That's why we call jnana vallal. So he talks about that wisdom. How do we expand that wisdom, knowledge? There's 4 important components important. Now, this is something very interesting happens. And now when that jnana goes on, something very important that happens that you would have not seen it, but now you'll see it in this model, which is very clear. You have this experiential enlightenment. Now you see something very interesting happens. What does that mean? You are now slowly starting to divinize your material thoughts through this introspection, contemplation, reflection, and meditation. You do not now, you see the position now, the awareness here, instead of moving up and down, you have moved up. Your level of spiritual awareness becomes better, and your material life also becomes more richer. So you're able to understand things better. You're able to understand your material life better. You're able to understand the spiritual being in you better than where you were in the earlier place before this happens. Right? Say, now I understand things better. Now I understand why this emotion is here, this thought here. And something very interesting happens. When you see now that at that state now, your material life's experience or desires goes up. It's higher than this pure materialist. Right? It is much more higher. But also your spiritual experience also is higher. Earlier you were trading off between the two. But through this Mahan's way of looking at things, this introspection, contemplation, reflection, we see that our material life becomes more richer, and our spiritual life also becomes more richer, better than where we were, better than the pure spiritualists, see? Better than the materialists. So we see that it is much more higher, right? So this is where we see that as our enlightenment expands, as our jnana expands, wisdom, knowledge expands, we see that our understanding of our lives and our spiritual as a being, our biological being and our understanding about the biological being and the spiritual being and the interconnection between the two becomes much more closer and much more richer. So, and this is what happens. This process, as you continuously do it, you see that you become more enlightened and more spiritual, and this process continues. That's how you started off somewhere here. It is not something that you will end, like how, we see that you end up here and that's it. It's an end game. In this context of Mahan's teachings, you continuously evolve. You continuously evolve from this awareness of this A2 state, and you push further, you move on to the next phase, you have a better understanding of your life, better understanding as you as a spiritual being, and this continuous awareness, you never stop learning. And what is really interesting is that the expansion continues. There is no end. Here there is an end, but in this continuum of Mahan's continuum, the awareness is infinite, infinity, universal. This is continuous awareness. You never stop learning, and you see that the awareness expands as you put it into, as you introspect, contemplate, reflect, meditate. You see that your bandwidth starts expanding. Your neural connectivity becomes more and more interconnected. Your biological personality and your spiritual personality becomes interconnected. There is no separation. Before there's a separation, you've got to pass from one to the other, and the gap is so wide, you see, and sometimes it's very difficult to make that leap. Occasionally you make that leap, but now you see that both that spiritual and the material personality becomes one together, and eventually they become seamlessly integrated. When they become seamlessly integrated, you don't see the difference between the biological personality and the spiritual personality. You have that convergence between the small I and the big I, before you see them differently. And this is why you're always trading off. This is why you always have this, do I go here? Do I do this? That is the zero-sum game that continuously takes place. But as we start introspecting, contemplating, reflecting, and meditating, as what Mahan showed, in everything that we do, in every thought, every experience, as a being, with our families, in our professional life, in our community life, all these are, points of convergence. As we see, why is this here? How is this here? And you start then now, the entire thought processes is now emerging from within, because what was separate now becomes closer and closer and closer as you move up. Eventually it becomes one integrated, substratum. Both there's a convergence, as Swami says, that small I converges to big I. Ni nan nane ni nium nanum nane nan. I become one. That no more two. My biological personality and my spiritual personality is one. And this is the point of universality. So there's continuous awareness, continuous, and you never stop learning. You see? The day you stop learning, that's the day I think everything ends, right? So this process continues, and this is what we mean by divinizing our desires. It is a point where every moment we are learning new things, new experiences, and we see that, everything, we come to a state where everything is a manifestation of God. Everything in this material world is a manifestation of God. Before, it was just a material life. We get more enlightened, right? Become more spiritual. As we progress, we see that everything in this material world, you realize, is a manifestation of God. My physical body, all my material thoughts, everything is part of this continuum called as God. And the same thing, the self, the spiritual component in me, is also a manifestation of God. And the convergence starts taking place. And this is what we mean by divinizing our desires. We come to a stage of convergence, we never stop learning. And this is the awesome beauty, and it shows in one's, demeanor, one's speech, one's thought. The thought processes are very, very clear, and there is no two. It's that one universal identity. And this is where Swamiji comes and says, he tells this whole story that both the Advaita and Dvaita are integrated in this. Both the ability to get that grace and introspection, contemplation, reflection, meditation brings that convergence in our material personality and that spiritual personality. And this is what Swamiji says. I have given here the gist of all the philosophies through this convergence process. And he says that for those who seek after the truth, knowledge, there is room to attain and to make further fruitful research. So the question is that, where are you in this continuum? How do you push to the next stage and the next stage? What are the key milestones? What are the key indicators? We have KPIs for many, many things. What is your KPI? How do you see the changes in you that takes you from the A1 to the A2 to the A3? What are the key things that you should be looking for? And what kind of research that you need to do for yourself to be able to undertake this exploration, this journey of spiritual enlightenment, where and the convergence. So this is what Swamiji says, that when you come to the highest level, you see the convergence of all the philosophies, the confluence of all the philosophies will give you that confluence of that mindset of that universality, that confluence that gives you the leadership and the creativity to see everything as one. And that's what the beautiful part of this great Mahan's teachings are. And Swamiji says beautifully that, seeking the inaccessible God, this continuous, turbulence in our mind. Do I do this or do I that? All that stops through this ceaseless search, through this introspection, contemplation, reflection, to make that inner pilgrimage. And when one attains that, gets to that inner pilgrimage and the journey continuously evolves, you know, you realize that God in entirety, the infinity, that universality is one and all. It's part and parcel of us. Our physical, our personality, our biological personality, and our material personality, or our material personality and our spiritual personality are the same thing. You see, when we don't know this, we are always in this trade-off. Do I do this or do I do that? But when you come to the state, it's all one. And you see that that's what makes life really awesome, inspirational, and beautiful. And that's what the essence of this Mahan's teachings, this great teaching that unifies what I call the general theorem, that you can see any philosophy that fits into this general theorem of what Mahan calls the IGOD. Sandosham. Thank you very much.